Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of this series called Stand Up and Out on the Forgotten Generation podcast with your host Troy. This series is about amplifying the voices of young people that are misrepresented in SEND and invisible disabilities, sharing lived experiences to stand up and out in the world on their journeys. And today's guest on this episode is Rachel. Would you like to introduce yourself? Who you are, age, and what is one word that describes you and your disability to the listeners?
Yes, I would love to. So my name is Rachel. I'm 24 and I'm really passionate about equality, mental health, disability rights, and youth voice. I am currently doing a part-time master's in gender conflict and human rights, and I also work for a local charity in Northern Ireland on their fundraising team. I am involved with youth advocacy projects through being an I Will ambassador. I'm on the Bernardos and Co-op Youth Advisory Group. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about young people using their lived experience and empowering other disabled people to use their voice. And one word that I would use to describe my disability is resilient, because I really think that being neurodiverse has taught me that difference is a strength, and that I think it's actually really beautiful to see the world in a different way.
Oh, I love that response. I love the word on resilience because I think it's so powerful.
Thank
I
you.
think it's like it describes you ever so much, and I think your journey is absolutely amazing. Like I've seen you do a lot of different things already, and so that brings me to the first question: is what is your journey as a neurodiverse young person?
So I have always been autistic, but I didn't always know that I was. I only got diagnosed when I was 20, and it's actually 4 years ago this month, so it's my anniversary. But yeah, I experienced the ways that my brain was different, like since I was a child. And growing up, I always had this overwhelming sense that I was an outsider, but I didn't really know why. Like the world felt too loud and intimidating, and I wasn't interested in things that other kids were interested in. And I found it really hard to speak to people unless they spoke to me. And of course, when you're in school, other kids kind of realize that you're different before you do, which kind of left me open to things like bullying. And I think the reason that it took so long for me to get diagnosed was a couple of things. So I think one was that I was still able to do well in school. I was quiet and I got good grades in my classes, and everyone thought the way that I was feeling was just because of my mental health. And I think the second reason is the way that autism presents in girls and women. Girls are so much harder to diagnose because they mask, which essentially is means that they learn how to socialize or communicate by copying or mimicking other people. So I suppose to answer your question, I think my journey is ongoing. When I think back to this time 4 years ago and when I got my diagnosis, I didn't really know what it meant. I was struggling a lot with identity and what barriers I might face. But speaking today, I feel so much more confident in being an autistic young woman. There are a lot of challenges that I have faced and will continue to, but a lot of them are caused by society's attitudes or systematic barriers, not sort of me being autistic. But being neurodivergent allows me to experience so much joy and allows me to empathize so deeply with others and to care so much about the issues I'm passionate about, which I think is why I ended up involved in so many different social action projects, probably like yourself. And I sort of made a promise to myself when I got diagnosed that I wasn't gonna change who I was for the world anymore, because I feel like I spent so many years doing that, and I was like, no, I have so much time now to actually figure out who I am and continue on that journey to really accepting myself and my identity.
Wow, so empowering. Like I'm going to just said actually touch me because I can absolutely relate to just feeling very much heard and being
Mhm.
autistic because it can be hard and
Yeah.
also masking as well. Because I always mask in certain situations, maybe at events, maybe doing meetings, and sometimes no one sees the like and the real me. No one sees that.
Yeah.
Because like I think it's very much behind the scenes aspect. What you said about being like undiagnosed as well. Was it a hard thing for you being diagnosed in that certain age as a girl and a woman as well?
Yeah, so I think what I really struggled with was going through education. Because I wasn't diagnosed, I didn't have like the supports that maybe other people would have had. Like I grew up, one of my close family members is autistic, and I grew up like advocating for them for years. I thought I knew like everything I needed to know about autism, but obviously I didn't, because it's so different in boys and girls. And when I think back to being a child, and the way that I sort of felt like, I didn't fit in, or maybe I didn't belong, I feel quite sad thinking about it. But I know that a lot of people talk about, they were diagnosed young and they still faced a lot of barriers. So I think we have like such a long way to go for supporting young autistic people in general. I found it quite hard having a late diagnosis, but that's not to say that I wouldn't have struggled, if I would have had it earlier as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's so, so important that you like but you are very much making a difference. And for other young people out there who are autistic, and you're doing such a brilliant job. And just like never give up on your voice because it's so important. And just coming on today's episode, you really are very much opening up to your disability and knowing that every other young person listening to this who has like a disability can really relate. So it's really powerful. And I'm so glad that you've shared
Thank you.
your journey with me on that one. And so, who inspired you to make a difference in your community as a neurodivergent person?
So like I've been inspired by so many people, but especially by other young activists who just use their voice, unapologetically, just completely like authentic. And an autistic activist that I am really inspired by and continue to be inspired by is Greta Thunberg. I think it's really inspiring the way that she started out caring about an issue. Like no one else was really involved in her climate strikes, but she kept going until people listened. And I also admire the way that her activism is so community focused, and how she recognizes that like all systems of oppression are linked, because I think you can't advocate for one thing without caring about all the other things that are interlinked. And closer to home, I have been inspired by my peers in like youth forums and advocacy groups. Seeing other neurodiverse young people share their stories was what sort of made me realize how important lived experience is, and how like powerful they can be as tools of change. One example is there's a young person who attends youth groups at my work, and she actually spoke at Belfast's International Women's Day rally in March this year, and she spoke about like her journey being a young woman who's autistic, and the barriers that she faced, and like what we need to do to make young people feel more included. I just think the way that she sees the world and has so much empathy for everyone. She's just like a ray of sunshine, and I just think she's brilliant, and I want to be more like her.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Such a beautiful response. And I think it's so amazing how activists like and Greta Thunberg has actually empowered you to make a difference because she's absolutely amazing. And she
Yes.
does a lot of climate change work and she very much campaigns a lot of time and effort in that to really showcase about this is a serious issue that people need to listen. And she's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely brilliant in that. And yes, I can absolutely relate to her in things. And yeah, I think there's so many amazing peers out there who do such incredible work who are neurodiverse as well, who really understand like the work that we do.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think like having like a community of people that understand your experiences and also just want to make a difference, like it's just so special. I wouldn't want it any other way. Like,
Same here. I wouldn't either. I love that. As it has there been your personal barrier and experience you face in your journey?
yeah, I sort of like hinted at it before, but like some of the biggest barriers I faced were in the education system. I think often things are set up, they're not set up for the way that neurodivergent brains work. The structure of the lessons, the way that we're like assessed with exams, and even like the type of environment that you work in, it's kind of all suited to one type of learner. And for me, to get through like school and uni, I felt like I was constantly having to mask or find like my own ways to work so that I could still do well. And masking can be really like exhausting. It can take a real toll on your physical and mental health as well. And I think for me, another big barrier is the lack of representation of neurodivergent and disabled people in like leadership roles. There were still so few in like positions of influence, whether it's like education, politics, or even like workplaces. And I think that absence really sends a message, whether it's intentional or not. It sort of sends a message that leadership looks a certain way. And if you don't see yourself represented in a position of importance, you might think that you don't belong there, or that you're not capable of getting there. So yeah, I think seeing more neurodivergent people in leadership would make such a difference to so many young people.
Yes, absolutely. Like more representation in jobs and just and in general, because it's like, and we don't see that, do we? And we
No.
see mainly like normal people get those jobs. Where are the neurodivergent people? Where are those who have disabilities? Where are those who have chronic illnesses? And where are they in getting those like and those like powerful jobs and those opportunities? Kind of not. It's kind of not happening. And like and school can be hard as well. And you kind of like have to mask there as well because not many
Mhm.
people will understand your disability and specifically, and there's not much like on support in a way sometimes. And for those young people who need that support because like I'm a staff are not trained and it can be hard.
Yeah, I feel like you always have to like advocate for yourself. And it can be like quite tiring when you're always the one that has to educate people. Like it should be the standard that everyone has disability training at the very least, and knows that they need to like make steps to adapt, whether it's like giving young people different ways they can learn, or like for jobs, like having different ways that people can do interviews, like really simple things that make
Yeah.
such a difference.
Exactly. And like the interviews and maybe like learning how to shop by yourself, learning how to
Yeah,
use a washing machine by yourself, or just learning how to do like adult stuff by yourself as well. And budgeting money.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All of those things. And it can be very overwhelming, can be very hard. I think that's important, that needs to be tackled. And thank you for sharing your personal and barriers because I can very much relate to that as well. And so, what are the key issues young people with special educational needs and disabilities are facing right now and why?
um Right now, I think some of the biggest challenges facing young people with special educational needs and disability are like poverty and like the cost of living crisis, inaccessibility, and like the social exclusion that comes with that, and also just a real lack of awareness and understanding. I think is still a huge thing. So like the rising cost of living is affecting everyone. Like this is a real UK wide thing, but for disabled people, it hits even harder because the cost of being disabled is a lot more than not. And many disabled people rely on things like extra supports, therapies, or like transport that are already really expensive or underfunded. And then when prices go up, I feel like disabled people are often the first to have to go without things. And then in terms of like inaccessibility, not just even physical barriers like buildings or transport, but also social barriers. I think, too often things like youth spaces or community programs aren't designed with like neurodiverse or disabled people in mind, which like again it can really impact a young person's sense of belonging. And then sort of finally, I think lack of awareness and understanding. Too many people like still see disability as something that they need to fix. And I think until we can change like attitudes, whether it's through education, like representation, and just like honest conversations, I think young disabled people will keep facing all of these unnecessary barriers that I really think could be removed with more empathy and just more inclusion. I think it's really good that young people are challenging all of these issues and these like bigger systems and speaking out more, but I think we really need the people, at the top, higher up, to listen and act and not just make promises.
Exactly. And you're saying it as a cheerleader here. Yes. This is what this is what I'm talking about. Look at us as very much important people as well as other young people. Because our voice matters. Our voice is so important. And we do need to educate our professionals and practitioners and the top people in government that don't really understand our disabilities and don't understand our needs. And there's so many things that we're dealing with, like poverty, like you said, like the crisis of cost of living, and so many
Mm-hmm.
things that we're dealing with. It's like education, mental health, preparing for adulthood, all of those things, and also jobs as well, and getting jobs and
Mm-hmm.
volunteering. So there's just so many issues that us young people are facing who are neurodiverse, but are not really getting listened to.
No, 100%. And I think like so many policies that are affecting disabled people haven't been made with disabled people consulted. So it just like it doesn't really make sense to me. Like, and I think having a diverse group of people making change isn't gonna just affect like disabled people. Like inclusion benefits everyone. So I don't think people realize that. It's like, no, people can bring fresh ideas, perspectives that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before, and it'll create like a better outcome for everyone.
Absolutely. Exactly. Inclusion is the key. Inclusion is so important. And that leads me to this question. If you were the Prime Minister or an MP, which I think you'd be good at, what would you do to say to them in better supporting our voice?
So I think if I was like prime minister in one of those positions, one of the first things I would love to do would be to like review and reform the UK's disability benefit system. I know it's just quite like a contentious issue at the minute, but at the minute, like it's just so complicated. And it's quite unfair to like the people who really need it. Like the PIP system, for example, it can be really like confusing and stressful to navigate, and it often feels like it's like designed to catch people out rather than like support them. So I'd want to start a review of that, to make it more simple and transparent and based on trust. So recognizing that disabled people are the experts in their own lives and their experiences. And something else I'd really like to do is change the universal credit system. So, like at the minute, it gives young people who are under 25 less money just because of their age. But like, it doesn't really make sense when you consider, like, especially disabled young people have the same bills and the same needs, but often higher costs of living. So yeah, like beyond that, I would love to see like policymakers making sure that disabled people and young people are included at every stage of their consultations. And I think, maybe something like creating a bill that states that young people need to be included in every type of change that's made. But yeah, I think I would be a very controversial prime minister. I'm not really afraid to say what I think, and like personally, I would get in there, and I'd love to be challenging some of the current misinformation about autism, and all this information about like it needs to be cured and people searching for the cause and all this here. When it's like, I think the more pressing issue is the amount of young people that are on waiting lists, to be diagnosed and for support for like send school places. So yeah, I don't think everyone would agree with me, but I think I would have a lot to say.
Yes, you would have a lot to say, and I think you would actually make the country more better. So with the commercial people and really tackling those key issues that I think
Mhm.
is very much relevant. And yes, the waiting list, make it more better and just the PIP and the benefits. Yes, all of that. I can just see you, honestly, just doing a job. And so what is one piece of advice to a young person wanting to stand up and out but don't know how to?
I would say start small because you don't realize the impact that your change might have. even if it's just on a small group of people. I would say don't be afraid to take up space. I think for like so many of us, and especially young people who are neurodivergent and disabled, we're often taught to make ourselves smaller to fit in, like stay quiet and don't make a fuss. But like your voice and your presence and your perspective are so powerful, and the world needs to hear them. And taking up space doesn't always mean being loud. It can mean showing up as your full self. It can be sharing your story, or like simply just refusing to hide parts of you that make you different. So yeah, I think change happens when people can see others around them being themselves. So I would say take up space, be confident, be kind, be courageous. And yeah, you deserve to be seen and heard just as you are.
I love that. That piece of advice. So, so important to finish this episode with that, because I'm sure many young people listening to this episode will really benefit on what you said, but also really feel inspired in this. So thank you so much for coming on today's episode of Stand Up and Out, Rachel, because it's been such an amazing conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. And I just want to say all the work you're doing is amazing. So I hope you give yourself credit as well for how many young people you're empowering, because I know you've really inspired me as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Rachel. Please support the podcast by subscribing and rating the podcast. I'd love to hear what you like and what could be better for future episodes. If you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram and iwill.troy, and also on X, iwill_Troy. Tune in to next week's episode.